Do you need to calculate the net hours from each project and activity from your employees? Maybe because you are project manager working with JIRA, or you have a timesheet and you want to make sure all the activities they are within budget. Consider that the working hours start at 8 and end at 5, and you don't consider any weekend. Maybe in a second phase you consider weekends to pay more for employees, maybe you consider that time as 1.5, 1.2. But in this case, I just want the net hours considering those restrictions. But if I try to do, for example, my end date minus my start date, Excel is going to return me something crazy here. Even though I change the type of this data, Excel is not going to return me the right calculation, especially for some dates that we have. For example, in this case here on row 11, that for example, we have the starting date as 11, and then the finish date is 16. So we have a weekend between this date. And also we need to make sure that, for example, in this case, it's past time. For example, this employee, he did the time sheet and he finished at 7. Maybe he needs to do something else, maybe he did something wrong, but we want to make sure we take until the finish date from our working schedule. So I want to present you some formulas. The first one is time. If you want to Excel return just the time and make sure he really understands what's the input, you can use this formula. So for example, you can add 800 to return a starting date from your schedule, and maybe you can use also time 1700 to return the end date from your schedule. Another formula that we are going to use is mod. Mod is used to return our rest from our division. For example, if we use an input and then we add a divisor, but in this case, since we are using hours, it returns the hours itself from a date. Let's say I take this start date and divide by 1, it returns me something very strange here with a lot of hashtags. But if I change it to general entry, I get this data 0.45. But if I do times 24, change again to general data, I get my time exactly whatever I have in my input. For example, in this case, it disregard the date and return me just the time. Another good formula that you may use from some other applications, one of them is a little bit more sophisticated, where you can input also the week numbers. But for us, we are going to use the first option, where we are going to input the start and end date. And if you want to be a little bit more sophisticated, you also can input a range with all the holidays from your firm. And in this example, if I take B2 as the beginning and C2 as the end, with this formula, I can calculate how long or how many days the guy, for example, went to the work, because in this case, it was just 1 day, but it was the entire day. But the networking calculates how many days the guy entered in the job to do the work. For example, in this case, we have a week in between. So we remove this calculation, so we take only the weekdays to do this calculation. I break this form in 3 pieces, and to avoid a lot of ifs, a lot of conditions and formulas very strange and very difficult to use, I'm going to use those formulas that I present to you plus max and min. It is required to break in 3 pieces because we have the start date, and the start date, they may start after or past 8. So for example, in this case where the guy started at 11, so that will be our partial hours from the start date. The second piece will be the same thing, but for the end date. And our final piece are the days that he worked the entire day. So we need to make sure we do the right calculation for those 3 pieces. This video is sponsored by Excel Mastery. Here is where I can teach you from the beginning to mastery how you can save a lot of time at work. I'm going to present you the best tools and best shortcuts to make you outstanding at work and make you not only save a lot of time at work, but also make your work-life balance much better. So if you want to know more about this course, check the link below in the description of this video. For us in this case, the partial hour will be the end of our shift. In this example will be 17 minus the start hours from the job. In this case, for example, it's 11. So our goal for the first column here is to get 6. Before I add all the conditions from this formula, because there are some trick parts, we need to first better understand how we are going to do this calculation. We are going to get first the time 17 minus the mod from this date divisor 1. If I hit enter, I will get something crazy, but remember that you need to do times 24 to get the right result. I go back and change here to general, and I get the same hours as I was expecting, 6. But remember that in this case, the user can input some stuff very wrong. For example, he can input a time before 8 or a time past 17. We need to input those conditions. So I want to return the calculation that I have, which is the time 17:00. So minus the max between, I want the guy to take every hour after 8. So I want the value max from between 8 or the time. Take the max between those two. So it will be time 8 or the mod from the date. Close the bracket and close the bracket again, times 24. But remember, if the guy put a date after 7, this calculation will be minus something. So I want to take 0 between this calculation, or 0 to take me the max between those two numbers. So if the first calculation is negative, then return me 0 times 24, because the guy basically didn't work from this day because he put a date before 8. If I disregard the start date, my partial end hour will be from 8 until the time that he finished the work. So it will be 15 minus 8 the calculation. Our goal here is to get 7. But remember that we also have the same condition. If the guy put an hour before 8, we want to disregard this first part. And if the guy passed the time, we also want to disregard this final part. For example, if he put 19, as we have some example here, I don't want to calculate those hours. So here I want to return the max from my calculation, which will be the mod from my end hour minus my time 8. So I want the minimum between my time and the time 7:00. I close the bracket here. If the guy puts the time as 7 a.m., this will return negative. So I want the max between 0. Change this to general and remember to do times 24. So we got the same value as we were expecting. I can drag down those dates, and here for the third part I want to calculate two things. If the guy worked the entire day, I want to return times 9 because it was from 8 to 17, but we also wanted to take or disconsider or if he worked less than 3 days. But if the net work is less than 3 days, he didn't work one entire day. So we are going to remove those pieces from the calculation to get the right sum from the net hours. So it will be my net working day, which will be the start and the 8th date here on the calculation, minus 2, because if he works less than 3 net works day, he's not going to work one entire day, times 9, because it's how much hours per day I could work. I again change to general, and here it returned minus 9. So if I do the calculation manually for this guy, it will be 15 minus 11. It will be 4. So if I do this sum here from those 3 entries that I created, I get the same information for here at the end. So I can drag down those 2 formulas, and then that's my final answer from this calculation. But if you prefer, you can use this whole formula in just one cell to get the final return, which is the same thing. I just copy and paste those 2 formulas that we have created for column G, H, and I, and paste it here in just one cell. But just remember that you need to keep this as a general entry to return the hours, otherwise Excel will understand or paste you as a date. If you need more tips on how you can do calculation for management and for better detail on reports on your Excel, follow me for more.